StoryCon presents Backstory, a podcast featuring writers, readers, and their stories, hosted by bestselling author Jennifer A. Nielsen.
Welcome, everyone, to the Backstory podcast. We are so glad you are here, and we have a very exciting guest this week. Now, the Backstory podcast is sponsored by Operation Literacy. On February 27th and 28th of 2026, they will present StoryCon 2026. It's a massive event for readers and writers, including tweens, teens, educators, and aspiring authors of all ages. One of this year's featured guests is with us here now, Soman Chainani. Soman Chainani's 6 novels in the School for Good and Evil series each debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. The series has sold over 4.5 million copies, has been translated into 35 languages, and has been adapted into a film by Netflix that debuted at #1 in over 80 countries. His collection of retold fairy tales, Beasts and Beauty, Dangerous Tales, was also an instant New York Times bestseller and is in development to be a television series from Sony 3000. Soman is a graduate of Harvard University and received his MFA in film from Columbia University. Every year, he visits schools around the world to speak to kids and to share his secret that reading is the path to a better life. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, Soman.
Thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Well, it's exciting for me. You and I, we have shared, we've been on panels a lot together, but I don't feel like we've ever had any in-depth conversations. So this is a great treat for me.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for making it happen.
I'm so interested in the last part of your bio that reading is the path to a better life. Can you tell me what that means for you, or why that's such an important message for you?
I think one of the interesting things about, the era I grew up in is that reading was considered a primary form of entertainment. There was a lot of boredom. There was no screens. There was not much to do other than, watch TV. And that was limited by the number of channels, or pick up a book. And with a book, you could kind of go anywhere. And you had a lot more choice. So unlike a movie or a TV where you were bound by, you know, a very limited number of selections, you could find any kind of book. And all you needed to have was an imagination big enough to keep up with the book. And it was a little bit like, the way you train for a sport when you're young, or get better at being an athlete, or getting better at playing the piano or something like that. It was a muscle that you learn to develop over time. And by reading, each book, you sort of developed a new way to imagine a new setting or a new character, or learn new words. And you were building this thing that ultimately gave you this huge imagination that was specifically yours. And I just felt like that was just part of being a kid. This ability to know your imagination, know yourself, know what you like, know what kind of tickled you at every sort of part of your being, and to know what books to look for. And now that's so under threat by everything. I mean, we can name 100 forces that are putting reading under threat. And what that's doing is ultimately taking away kids' right to develop their own imaginations. And they're relying on other people supplying visual content that replaces it. And so, in a way, they're becoming programmed robots versus kids who are able to have say over their own life because they understand themselves. So, to me, reading is the path and the only path to develop the thinking and the imagination that you need in order to thrive as a human.
Wow, I completely, I mean, that's singing my song too. I worry
Mm,
about, the fact is, I want creative doctors and
mm,
creative engineers and creative attorneys out there, creative businessmen. And so I think the reading really it is our future
mhm.
because of the imagination. I love that you expressed that. So you must have been a great reader growing up then.
I mean, it's funny because my older brother was the better reader. Like, in a way, his teachers were always challenging him to read huge books like Gone with the Wind when he was in fourth grade, I remember, and he was reading Crime and Punishment in sixth. And I always felt like, okay, like he's the amazing reader, which is actually good because it takes the pressure off me and I can just go read stuff I like. So I was always the kid who was sneaking like books that he probably shouldn't be reading. Like I was reading like Anne Rice at 11, um, and all kinds of stuff. I like the more kind of illicit stuff, but I love the idea of entering adult worlds as a kid,
Mm.
which is so funny because I think the reason that was is you had either two choices, kids' books or adult books. There wasn't this sort of thriving YA world at that point. So I just skipped straight to adult books. And, I was reading Silence of the Lambs when I was in sixth grade. And I was reading, what else? Stephen King and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I read Presumed Innocent when I was in seventh grade, Michael Crichton's book. So, like, I just was in an adult world, um, which forced me to A, develop my vocabulary, and B, uh, kind of, go into these crazy imaginative spaces. What's interesting is, there's all this nonsense now over um, book banning and all that kind of stuff, which very much is transparent in what they're actually trying to do. But at no point are they like trying to wall off like adult books. You know what I mean? It's about like trying to censor material in certain books, but kids wherever they go into a library are still going to have access to adult books. And the reason that never, I think, bothered people, including parents, for many many years, is a kid's imagination is limited by what they know. So I could read all this crazy stuff in Anne Rice or whatever books I was reading at the time, but you don't know anything. So you can't imagine something you don't understand. And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the great things about reading versus social media or, being on the internet or TV and film, where you can expose someone to something way before they're ready and in a way kind of almost traumatize them. Where reading is its own inherent gatekeeper. You only know what you know. And with experience and with life, you're able to go back to books that you read when you were younger and have a different experience of them.
That was mine with Catch 22,
Oh, yeah.
which I read far too early, and The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh,
And
100%. I mean, it's funny. I read that book, Dorian Gray, at least once every 4 or 5 years. And still, I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. Understand this. It's continually evolving that way, you know?
it is, and but you're right. I mean, um, if you're not ready for something, usually it'll just kind of go over your head,
It
and it
does go
just
ahead.
it just passes through. Um, were you, as a child, were you an obey the rules type of kid, or push the rules, or outright break the rules type of kid?
I wasn't a break the rules kid, but I was very suspicious of rules that I thought were stupid. And I still am that way, to this day, where I'm like, why is this a rule? Like every time I get on an airplane, they're like, "Oh, put your phone in airplane mode." And you're like, this is a stupid rule because A, no one obeys it. B, no one's explained why. And all these different things are like, put your laptop here. And I'm always like, anytime somebody says this has to happen, I'm like, but why? Like, why do we have this dumb rule that doesn't make any sense? So I think I was like that as a kid too. Anytime, when teachers had rules that I thought were nonsensical, especially with dress codes and things like that, where girls were held to a different standard. And I'd always be like, well, that doesn't seem very fair to them. So I think it was always questioning. And I think that's what's in my work the most is characters that are questioning the rules and always kind of like testing them, being like, is this actually in our best interest?
Wow, so that comes through in your writing. Do you have any of your characters who is very much you?
Yeah, I think Sophie in the School for Good and Evil is an interesting character because when it was going through editing, that was my first book ever. I hadn't read widely in the middle grade space. So I was kind of just doing whatever I wanted. And HarperCollins, the copy editing team was like, there's so many things in this book you can't have. Like, they were like, there was this whole scene where Sophie sleeps over in Hort's room because they get locked in a room together, and they're like, "You can't have a girl, a middle, theoretically a middle school girl, even though Sophie's age is never mentioned in the book. They're like, you can't have a middle school girl in a boys' room overnight." I'm like, "But they're locked in there. Why?" They're like, "Oh, it's just like a rule." I'm like, "By who? Where is this magical rule?" And so we argued over it. They're like, "No school will allow it in the library, da da da." Because I'm like, "This is ridiculous." So finally, I have her say, he's like, "Well, we're stuck in here then." And she's like, "Well, you have to leave, even though it's your room, because a boy and a girl can't cohabitate in the same room overnight. It's a rule." And then by her saying it, it then opens up this whole, discussion. And of course, they end up staying in the room overnight. And so that became my strategy, was to always just have someone, like, if any time I got presented with a rule, you can't have this in middle grade, I'd just have the person be like, "This is a rule." And the other person would be like, "Why is this a rule?" And they would end up breaking it.
My experience with that was with The False Prince. The original title was Devil Prince
Mm.
because of a line in the book. And my publisher was like, "We can't put devil on the title." And I was like, "Why? It's not a Satan book." And they're like, "Yeah, we can't do that." And so that was my introduction to rules I didn't get, but it was a
So
rule.
many of those. Like, it's the second book in the School for Good and Evil. Tedros on the cover was sleeveless and kind of like a, sleeveless vest thing, and he was angry, and they were like, "You can't have sleeveless, and he can't be angry." I'm like, "What?" Why? They're like, "No, you can't have an angry face on a cover." I was just like, "This is ludicrous." But with covers, often, um, you have to follow these ludicrous rules because they ultimately control it. You're not able to explain a cover the way you can explain something in a book.
Yeah.
So the rules on a cover usually end up kind of beating you in the end.
Okay. I'm going to put up to that end your cover right here,
Oh yeah.
which I have always thought is one of the most gorgeous covers to come out in this generation of books. To you, what are your thoughts? Like, you first saw this cover, what are your thoughts on it?
I loved it. It went through so many different kind of incarnations, but the artist Jacopo Bruno always had the sort of kind of general feeling in mind that I wanted, which is, I said I wanted it to look exactly like Disney until you
Mm,
start kind of poking at it and looking at it closer. And then you're going to be like, wait, something's off. And so he had the idea of switching the two girls so they're on, the right side of where they end up in the schools in the book, but it looks slightly off. He gave, Sophie, we worked very hard on giving her that Mona Lisa smirk. And I just loved the colors of it, the feel of it. There was something really special about that cover. And I wish it was still in circulation today. I mean, to me, it's really one of my favorite covers ever.
mhm.
Um, we had to change it because as the books came out, and you had 6 books in the series, and you have so many different colors and composites and stuff, uh, people were getting confused as to which book was which one in the series. So we had to go to a sort of a more color organized scheme. But that first book was such a special cover for sure.
Oh, no, I think they've all been. You've done very well with your covers, in
Mm,
my opinion. All right, I wanna back up just a little bit. You attended Harvard University.
mm.
What did you study?
I studied English because back then it was a pretty liberal arts education where even if you thought you were going into business or something like that, um, there was no business major, luckily, because that's probably what I would ended up doing. And so English just felt like the right way to spend time because I could go anywhere from there.
Yeah, and you went on to Columbia and, got a Master's of Fine Arts in Film,
Yeah, that was
correct?
after a period where I went into business, was a pharmaceutical consultant, thought like I'm just gonna do the good Indian thing. Um, I never really thought I'd be a writer or anything like that. I just at that time in life I didn't think it was a viable career. You had to go make money.
Mhm.
And then I kept getting fired from all my jobs because I wasn't doing anything. I was sitting in the corner working on my stories. And so after that, once you get fired enough times, your Indian family is like, well, you have to do something that, you're going to actually succeed at. And so that's why I went to film school.
Okay, I gotta back up because I
Mm.
didn't know this part about you. So you were doing these jobs, these pharmaceutical rep jobs, but you're writing on the side.
Yeah, I
Is
was
that
just in the corner. I mean, I was literally at the office just working on this thing, and like I don't know how I got away with it for like literally a year and a half in that first job, absolutely doing nothing. If you ask me one thing I did at that job, I can't think of it. Like I was getting paid a consultant salary, and this makes me fear for every company using consultants. Like, are they actually doing anything? Because I certainly wasn't. You know.
all right? And so what was it one story or just a series of short stories? What were you working on?
It was a fairy tale novel that had a Sophie-esque character, but it wasn't, School for Good and Evil. It was about a modern teenage girl who gets, lost in fairy tale land, but she doesn't know how any of the fairy tales go. So she reacts to them the way a normal girl would. Um, and there was something about that where, again, it was like breaking all the rules of, established storytelling and things like that. And I think I learned how to write that character uh, very well by doing that book. I got about halfway through. And then many years later, I think she became kind of Sophie.
Interesting. At the time you were writing that, was it with the hopes of getting published one day, or was it just fun?
No, because I don't think Harry Potter was even out yet, or if it was out, it hadn't really like taken off or anything like that. So there was no viable path for something like that, like a sort of, big fairy tale complex book. I mean, I'd read Wicked, but that felt like an adult book. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm writing an adult fairy tale or something. But I never thought about publishing. I think Potter, when it sort of did its thing, and I still didn't have any designs on a career because that felt like such a singular phenomenon. It's when everybody started writing middle grade and YA in the wake of Harry Potter, where I was like, well, if all these people are doing it, I feel like I could do it because I actually feel like I have a better command of storytelling than a lot of this. Um, so I think that's when I finally was like, all right, let's give this a whirl.
Was it easy for you to break in?
Well, the thing was I was working as a screenwriter. So, I knew a lot of people in Hollywood, and so School for Good and Evil was actually, conceived of as a film first. I had written a giant outline for a movie version of it, and, the producer that I was working with at the time, Jane Starts, who had done Ella Enchanted, the movie, and The Mighty and Indian in the Cupboard and Babysitter's Club, she read it and she was like, "No one's gonna make this, but I actually think it would be amazing as books." And so she really was the one who kind of pushed me to say, "I think like, I know everyone in publishing, why don't we just send this out as a book proposal?" So we spent a year working on the proposal, really kind of getting in there and, she encouraged me to, um kind of early on name everything, like give everything a name. Like what's the name of um, the bay at the school, the between the two schools, what's the name of the bridge? What's like try to name everything so that you've created this world in people's heads even before the novel's written. So I did the proposal and then um she sent it out and I think she sent it out to about 16 publishers, and I think all of them but one had the same feedback, which is this is highly romantic, very charged, and you can't have that in middle grade. Again, a rule,
A rule.
right? And I was like, who said like that's the worst rule? I said because every middle schooler, all you do is you go to middle school, and all they're completely charged up with soap opera and romance and all that stuff, even if it's not real, it's just in their heads. It's why they all listen to Taylor Swift, right? They listen to Taylor Swift because they're living in these romantic fantasies that they don't even understand and can't make sense of. And it's just, the way it is of being a tween and an early teen. Um, and I was like, if it doesn't exist, it should. And I, really made that case until Phoebe A at HarperCollins was like, he's very passionate about it. Let's try. And that ultimately became what made the book you know, what it was it was the first middle grade romantasy.
Yeah, and I think that is part of what readers have responded to is there is something there that because it breaks the rules,
Hmm.
it's something different that they're not getting anywhere else.
And reviewers hated it. I mean, hated it. You can go back and look at some of those early reviews and, oh, because it was just so in between anything they'd ever seen, right? It was romantic, but then it was also young and it was middle school, but then it also had some high school elements, and none of the characters' ages were mentioned, and it was just like, well, what is this then? And so like everyone was kind of arguing over how appropriate it was. Um, and I was just like completely unbothered. I'm like, oh, then let's see what the kids think. And of course, the kids were, eating it up because they would go to their parents and say, okay, like the parents would be like, let me read it. And I heard this story many times. The parents would be like, okay, I want to read it too, or I want to read it to you, or something. And the kid would be like, oh no, this one's not for you. And I always felt like, I always felt like that was the secret of that book, is it just had a little bit of, it took kind of like what I loved in the series of unfortunate events and Roald Dahl, where it was like mischievous, and it just kind of like went up a level up to the point of it was just on the edge of I think, at the time what I could get away with. Now it's so tame, compared to everything out in the world and all that kind of stuff. But at the time it was very, very edgy.
So the reviewers are not cheering it on, but you had your confidence in the book. When did you know this thing was going to hit so big?
I mean, you don't ever know, but the movie rights got bought the day it came out. So I thought that was a first sign. There were little signs like that, the Universal going very big on it very early. And then uh I felt like the sales were so steady, each week it was exactly the same number. And then it came out in paperback about 11 months later, and it just exploded in paperback. It was almost like everyone had heard of it, all, especially the young girl audience had heard of it and wanted to read it. And as soon as it was cheap, because at that time paperbacks were $6.99, um, like that first week was unbelievable in terms of how many it sold. It's interesting now because the difference in price between a paperback and hardcover is not such a crazy, leap. Back then it was like the hardcover was 17.99, 18.99, and the paperback was 5.99, 6.99. So there was a huge difference in consumers' behavior around paperbacks and hardcovers.
Yeah. So, all right, the film rights got sold. Then, how long from when they bought the film rights, when they
Mm.
optioned it, until you got the green light that you knew
Oh,
this is gonna get made?
10 years. I mean, it was a long time because it was at Universal, almost got made. Then we just got this terrible screenwriter who kind of messed everything up and put us back to square one. And then by then, Wicked was starting to get traction at Universal, and Wicked is such a known property, and this covered some of the same ground, and so it just didn't make sense that they would make both. Luckily, we were able to get the rights out from Universal. Netflix bought it from them. Then we had a director who I loved. Uh, for a while, we worked on it for about 2 years, and then she got fired. Um, and so it was just like, and then Paul Feig finally came on, and then COVID hit. And then you're like, but somehow, like, we just powered through all of it. So I think ultimately it just had its own kind of story and life to it and all that stuff. But it was 10 years because it was bought in May 2013, and it came out end of 2022.
So, with you having a screenwriter background and you've been in Hollywood and you've been in film, how did that impact you watching other
Mm.
screenwriters take charge of this? What was that experience like?
It was difficult because I did the first draft with Malia Scotch-Marmo, who's this incredible writer who did Hook and a few other screenplays and was my professor at Columbia. And we wrote the first couple drafts for Universal that we were really, really happy with, and everyone seemed to be happy with. Um, but ultimately, the way those movies work is when you have a really big budget, they want a screenwriter who has a very big name also to protect them. Because if the film bombs, then, and they're like, oh, we had the author write the screenplay, the executive will get fired. But if they're like, oh, we had this guy who wrote Batman write it, like,
Mm.
who knew that it would bomb? They're somewhat protected. So ultimately, none of the executives really read our draft. They had already hired someone else. And so that was kind of the lesson, which was, you know, all the work I had put into that draft, solving so many of the problems, it never got looked at. And so I spent the next 10 years trying to help other people solve problems I had already solved. So, and the thing is, I couldn't show them that draft. It's part of just Writers Guild rules and stuff. I couldn't be like, look at these pages. I solved it for you. Like just use these 2 pages. I had to kind of talk them through something I'd already done. So it's interesting. There was a screenwriter at one point who just had kind of like gone on strike, and it's the sense of not wanting to do any more work. And the director was sort of, doing passes on the screenplay, and I was like almost feeding her pages of mine. And some of it ended up in the final one. But that's what it really was. It was this frustrating thing of trying to get my version into the final one where I felt like it would make it better.
Yeah. All right. So your book, Beasts and Beauty, is that still on track for development?
That one's tricky because after the writer strike, it's an anthology series, so there's different fairy tales. And after the writer strike, I think everything has kind of changed in Hollywood. So I don't know. It might take a different form. We might end up doing just a movie version of one of them. It's still open. There's so many options of what to do with that one. So that one we'll have to see how it goes. I think the film and TV industry has changed so much that, and will continue to change as AI sort of takes over. That um, there's going to be a lot more options and also a lot less options at the same time. So we'll have to see what ends up happening with that one.
Yeah, I'm interested too, and I love that you brought up AI as it is going to impact
Mm.
art. Any thoughts on AI in the literary world?
I mean, it's coming. People are going to self-publish all kinds of AI books, and I think you'll see like people sneak those traditional publishers too, who will accidentally publish fully AI books. Um, I mean, my thought process on it is, if a reader thinks like it's fun to read a fully AI book, will not they might not even know. They might have grown up with so much AI content that it feels totally natural to them to read an AI book. So at that level, we can't really protect it. It's like the reader's going to do whatever they want. I think on the writer level, I think we're going to have two types of writers: the ones who genuinely like to write, um, and the ones who would just want to get published and want to
Mm,
be famous and successful or whatever. Those authors will do whatever it takes, right? They'll happily, you know, let AI write their book. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know if it's so sustainable to have a career where you're just having a computer write your books for you, at least at a soul level or something like that. So to me, I think I just love the challenge to some extent of trying to stay ahead of AI. I wrote a book called Young World that comes out in May next year, which I invented a new kind of genre and form for it. It's in full color. It has over 200 pieces of art in it. It's a form and genre that don't exist yet. And so to challenge myself that way allows me to stay ahead of AI in some extent, to know that AI could never produce this because it doesn't exist. So therefore, it couldn't have been scraped before.
uh, brilliant. You mentioned Young World. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's about a very near future, or a future that's happening right now, where two old people are running for president, both kind of, doing the usual hits of um, just polarization and all that kind of stuff. But it's very clear that they're going to continue politics as usual. And a young kid who's in love with a girl who calls him a do nothing and says he just basically spends his days on social media and being a stupid teenager, dares him to like do something with his life and actually stand for something. So he makes a TikTok jokingly saying, "This girl won't date me unless I do something with my life. So all of you should write me in for president because screw these guys. Why do we have two old zombies running for? I don't care if I'm 17. The Constitution doesn't let me run, but whatever. Let's mess with the election." And he gets 45 million votes. And it messes with the election. And the Supreme Court, in order to get the Democrat and Republican from basically, you know, trying to steal the election from each other and create anarchy and basically Handmaid's Tale, makes the kid president for 24 hours just to like get the other two sides to work together before they get rid of this kid. And in those 24 hours, 8 other governments fall to teenagers. And so the book, that all happens in the first 20 pages. And so the book is about what happens when you have teenagers running essentially the Western world.
Oh, dang. And when does that come out?
Comes out May 2026.
Okay. All right. It is just gonna mentally stick that onto my
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
calendar.
I'll be talking about it when I come to StoryCon in February. That'll be sort of one of my focuses.
Yes, but in the meantime, at StoryCon, also Coven,
Oh yeah,
correct?
yeah. Coven K. That was my first graphic novel. We're going to be doing
Mhm,
the whole School for Good and Evil series as um, kind of beautiful, cool graphic novels with each book divided into 3 volumes. So you're really going to get this immersive program of graphic novels of the School for Good and Evil world. And I just wanted to make sure I knew how to do one. So Coven was it's in the School for Good and Evil world. It's about the 3 witches
mhm.
in the School for Good and Evil world, and I just wanted to play around with doing a graphic novel. So it really was kind of an experiment and a fun opportunity to try something different.
What did you learn that you had not known about, graphic novels?
I think the collaboration with the artist is super important, you know. I think it was especially with going from that to then going to the School for Good and Evil graphic novels. I wanted to make sure, like, okay, I need somebody that I really can get in there with and work because Coven was a little um, more of a separated process. So when I see the finished book, I feel like there was more opportunity for me to get in there in a deeper way from the beginning. You know, even though I wrote the script and obviously wrote the story and everything like that, it's just a different medium, you know, when you can't draw because you can't control it the same way, you know? So I wanted to make sure with all the School for Good and Evil graphic novels coming up uh, that I had an artist that I really was 100% in sync with.
Okay. What does a working day look like for you?
Typically, I get up, I go play tennis, in the morning, right when I get up, like around 7, and then, I come back, you know, do some admin, eat breakfast, do that thing, and then I usually start writing around 10, and then 10 to 2, I'm writing. Then I go, to the gym for an hour to blow off steam, and then I'll come back and work from, like, 4 to 6, 6:30, and then the night wherever the night takes me. So it's kinda broken up into these little periods.
Mhm. Are there any authors working today who have had a big influence on you?
It's a good question. I read so much adult stuff, so it's difficult to. I don't really read in middle grade and YA all that much, unless a book is sent to me for blurbs and everything like that. But I think what's fun about our world is we become friends with people, right? So like Victoria Aveyard's one of my best friends, and so
Mhm.
I read her books from the perspective of being her friend. Jenny Han's one of my great friends, so then being able to read her books from the perspective of being her friend, like there's something fun about getting to read your colleagues' work when you know them as people and you get to see this other side of them. It's almost like you have a portal into their unconscious. So that's the other thing I really enjoy about, I think, this industry is getting to have friends whose work you can participate in outside of your friendship.
Yeah. Can you tell us, about a time and large or small and near history or far
Mm.
history in which you just failed, fell flat on your face?
I mean, I think there were so many times where in film school I took big swings and things were bad. And I think that was the fun part about film school is to constantly have these big ideas of I'm going to try this and attempt to execute it. And it just tanked. You know, I my thesis film I spent a year on and like tens of thousands of dollars that I took out of loans, you know, borrowing against my future. Um, and everyone was like, "I don't think this is working." And I just kept, you know, banging my head against the wall, and I ultimately made something kind of terrible. And so I think that was a lesson too of you can be stubborn, which I am. Like I'll go at something if I think it's a good idea, but I also need checkpoints along the way to make sure it's working.
Mm. And do you when you're those checkpoints, are those internal checkpoints or are those other people giving you feedback
It's other
checkpoints?
people giving feedback. So I'm not like other writers who just finish their first draft and then send it to the editor. I'm always sending pieces as I go, you
Mm,
know. Um, is this okay? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Are you into this? Like, you know, are you getting anything from this? And I don't want notes. I just want like green light, yellow light, red light. That's what I'm asking for, you know?
mm. Yeah, yeah.
Um, So yeah, I'm working on a new fantasy series now, and I have a new editor. First time in 10 years, I have a new editor because my last one retired, and it was very much that sending the first 30 pages and being like, "Can I keep going?" And they're like, "Keep going." I was like, "Okay." So like that's all I need. Sometimes I need that gut check from somebody else.
I think that's wise.
You
I
know.
do. All right, you also regularly visit schools
Mm.
worldwide. Where have you been? And you may not necessarily school name, but place that
Mm.
will always stay with you.
Oh wow. God, probably doing stuff in India was always really fun. Because the kids there are so literate and well read, um, that they can understand all my fairy tale references. I feel that way whenever I go to England too. I feel like they just are a different level of literate,
Hmm.
um, in a way that I the US maybe was more like once upon a time, but I also feel like those readers understand sarcasm and dry humor, something in the British sense of humor, much better than kids here. Sometimes I feel like they'll read School for Good and Evil quite literally and not see it's a satire. And if you read that book literally, like you can end up really kind of tying your head in knots. So I think I did. That's what I enjoyed about those two places.
Yeah. Are there any fan moments that will always stay with you?
There was one kid after the first book whose mom said she found a letter to Santa Claus somewhere in his room, where he was like, I just read The School for Good and Evil. He didn't realize it was a series. So he said, I just hope I wish that the author would write a sequel. And that's what I would ask Santa for. And I had just finished the second book. And so we got an early arc, and the mom put it in the kid's stocking. And the kid was like, what? Like, because he didn't know the mom saw the letter, right? Didn't think there was a sequel. And so I just can imagine that moment where you see it, like, and you just must think for a second that you made magic happen. So the stories like that I love, where you can have that, but that they're rare. But when it does happen, it's kind of amazing.
No, that's pretty amazing. That's something, I mean, he'll remember that the rest of
100% because it's that moment of for a second he thought he was Zeus. Like
Yeah.
I made this book appear out of like I commanded this author to write this thing and it happened instantaneously, you know what I mean? So it's kind of
Oh,
crazy.
you've had a lot of success and ongoing success, I know. Do you feel as though you've made it, whatever it is for you? Do you feel like you've arrived at your dream?
Well, what's interesting is this world and industry is changing so much that if you even think that for a second, you're about to be unemployed. Like everything's happening so quickly. So, you know, after COVID, literacy rates plunged. And then by the time you're starting to get those back up and get back into schools and teach kids, then they start banning books. And now authors can't, I'm invited to less schools than I used to be because um, if you're not a white author, if you're brown, a lot of schools can somehow be taken for that as DEI and therefore be under pressure by school boards and things. So the temptation is to not have authors of color visit. So that's another thing that's threatening. Then you have AI threatening. And so you can't like you can't rest for a second because there's so many threats that are coming for your job. So I think every author is under some kind of existential threat in today's climate, whatever that is. And the question is, you have to figure out you have to figure out a way around it because otherwise, yeah, you might not have a job very long.
Yeah. And sadly, I think you are exactly right. I was as a white person, but I
Mm,
was uninvited from a school visit because the district canceled all author
yep.
visits because they didn't want to be seen as discriminatory
Hmm.
for the brown-skinned author they were refusing.
Of course. I mean, and the worst part is I understand the dilemma. Like I would in their position, what do you do? Like you're essentially the thing that you relied on to be able to bring authors in now is has put you in this box of the you're trapped either way. So My hope is it comes back, but it won't be in this 4 years, so we'll have to see what happens in the future. But right now, kids aren't getting school visits the way they used to. That's for sure.
No, and I think about where we began with this interview, that reading will change your life, will
Hmm.
elevate your life, and why. And that when that's the author's message, it's so critical that kids get this exposure and opportunity to hear from their favorite author.
Yeah, and it's just sad, But I'm trying to find other ways to get in front of them, and hopefully those will work. But I think we're in a particularly precarious time that there are no answers for right now.
It's a tough time. I do want to do a series of quick
Oh yeah,
answers,
sure.
and we'll just get just a final to know you. So, pizza or hamburgers?
I don't really eat much of either. I definitely like pizza more.
All right. Favorite kind of pizza?
Mushroom.
Ooh. All right. Beach or mountains?
I grew up on a beach, so mountains. Beach just feels like normal to me.
All right. I live in the mountains. Come visit. Cats or dogs?
Dogs, 100%, not even a question. I mean, it's funny, we just did a podcast episode, um, where, I insulted cats quite brazenly, and my co-host was like, "Do you wanna re-record that?" And I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Cat people will come for you." I'm like, "I am more than happy for cat people to come at me."
So you've expanded it. Cat people here on this episode are now going to be
I'm
like,
like 100% dog person. I'm like the ultimate dog person.
all right, cat people, don't take it out on me. Go
No,
straight to
don't.
Soman. Uh, all right, somewhere you've never been, but you would love to go.
That's a good one. Maybe Japan.
Mm. All right, given the opportunity, would you parachute from an airplane, or have you?
No, absolutely not. I can't do anything where, like, the risk of death is just very high, like, at least high in my mind. Like, I don't even go in helicopters, you know?
Okay. All right, so no near-death experiences. We're
No.
avoiding those.
Yeah, please.
Advice for young writers.
I'd say keep a diary because you need to learn how to write for yourself and not for others. And if you really develop that skill where you're like, I am writing to me and and no one's gonna read this and this is for me, that's when you'll really jump in a level.
Mm. We mentioned your podcast. Can you tell us what it is so listeners can find you there too?
Oh, sure. It's called Plot Twist. It's hosted with Victoria Aveyard, who wrote Red Queen. And it's really about the behind the scenes of writing our latest books, which are both kind of risky and crazy books. So we wanted to do like a week by week, like, well, what does an author do, to get a book from like where we're writing all the way to the finish line. So it really is specifically for aspiring authors and established authors to understand the entire nitty gritty of making a book.
Oh, it sounds amazing, and listeners, you should definitely check that out. My final question for you, Soman. Project into the future. So future you
Mm,
gets the chance to come back to Soman in 2025.
mm.
What does future you say to you now?
Let me think. Future me coming back to me. I think he would just tell me to stay human, probably, because I think that's going to be the challenge. Like, can you stay human in a world where being human is not going to be particularly valued? So I think that'll be the challenge.
Wow. Where can readers connect with you or learn more about you?
My Instagram is Somanc, Somanc, or I have a weekly Substack called Diary of a Novel, which also is kind of what I'm thinking about that week. So you can find me there on Substack, and yeah, it's under my name.
All right. And you can be found at StoryCon coming in
Hmm.
February 2026,
Looking
which
forward to
is
it.
going to be an amazing event. And the fact that they got you to come to that conference is a coup.
Oh,
So, very
thank you. I
exciting.
can't wait. I love Utah, so I'm excited to go back. But
Fantastic.
thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks also to my producer, Eric Anderson, who I very rarely call out. He should be called out every time. He is the magic behind the scenes of this show and many others who work on it. to all of you. We all have a backstory. It's the life that happens to us before we begin happening to life. It molds you, it forms you into the amazing person you are, which means your story will always be important. Get out there now, tell your story. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Backstory. If you'd like to enjoy more episodes, visit us at storycon.org/backstory. That's StoryCon.org/backstory.